Waterways on Isles.
So
Not represented.
somebody is recording this, which doesn't bother me, but under Florida law, everybody needs to know that they're being recorded. And, you know, that they're, so, I don't know who's recording it or.
What's your name, sir?
Me, Jeff Rames, Lauderdale Isles, Water Management District.
I'm sorry, the gentleman that's recording.
I think we just need to know for the record who's recording.
Me, Jason Thomas.
Jason Thomas.
Okay, I'm gonna send around a sign-in sheet.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. As you know, we've been reading in the newspaper and we've been getting a lot of emails and phone calls in our office about the issue of the algae blooms, and I just thought it would be a really good idea if we came together and heard from our staff and basically would educate us and help us understand what's happening, what the concern is, and what basically we can do about it. So I'm going to turn this over now to Todd and Larry, who have some handouts. Gentlemen, thank you. Take it away, and then we'll also have questions as well. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you again for the opportunity to be here and to discuss this issue. It's, as you are aware, it's a statewide issue. I was at a conference last week, and the DEP for the Department of Environmental Protection Secretary was there, and he was talking about the algae blooms throughout the state, as well as the red tide that's impacting the southwest coast. So this is certainly a state issue, and of course it's impacting us here locally. And the primary point I want to emphasize is that we all can do something to help prevent algae blooms. Algae, first of all, is caused by nutrients, primarily phosphorus and nitrogen. And primarily they get into our waterways, particularly at the homeowner level, by fertilizer. And you know, it's key to implement best management practices for fertilizer application on our properties. We actually do, some people may not realize, we actually do have a Florida-friendly fertilizer use ordinance in the code section. And Florida DEP, through the University of Florida and IFAS, they do a great job of promoting Florida-friendly principles, which one of those is landscaping practices, and they particularly have a chapter on fertilizer. And that's a handout I brought here from that 2015 handbook that I have 15 copies here. Obviously it's short a little bit. I think our team is making some more as well. So I'll leave my business cards as well, that anyone can follow up with us as needed on questions. But as far as best management practices, you know, the state recommends, particularly for algae that we're seeing in our waterways, you know, we don't like back to see fertilizer applied within 10 feet of a waterway. Okay, that's primarily number one, 10 feet of waterway. The way fertilizer works is there's a tendency to over-fertilize. You know, the thought that the more fertilizer, the greener the lawn will get, but plants will only utilize what's available, and they can, the rest just sits there and be washed off into our waterways through our storm drain systems and so forth like that. So 10 feet of waterway, keep fertilizer off hard surfaces. If there's any type of spilling on the fertilizer to pick it up and so forth. And all this stuff is also on our Green Routine web portal on the City of Fort Lauderdale website as well. So that's a good resource for information as well, with different links through different agencies. It's also important to realize that not all algae is toxic. It is a natural occurring organism. I know in the papers and so forth they throw the word toxic out there, but actually not all algae is toxic. As a matter of fact, the state has tested the waterways in our area. The last test coming in, I believe, last week on the 17th, and they've been sampling our waterways since about August 30th. So there's about 8-9 samples for within a 30-day period. There's been no toxins detected, all below detectable limits. So that's a good thing. There is a difference between the algae blooms we're seeing here versus the algae blooms you may be seeing in other parts of the state, particularly along the St. Lucie estuary and the Caloosahatchee estuary, which are getting direct water from Lake Okeechobee, which because of the dike situation up there, the Corps has to keep it at a certain height, lower than usual. So when we get a lot of rain up in the central part of Florida, it drains into the lake, and therefore they have to lower the watershed. It'll drain out into those rivers, and that's where you see a lot of the toxic blooms that get algae and nutrient input from the agriculture industry up in the central part of the state. So that's kind of it. I'll just be informal. So any questions, just please raise your hand, and I'll go ahead and.
So let me just jump in So, one of the reasons why we asked the commissioner to host you all is we need some help spreading the word in terms of what best practices are. So Todd talked a minute ago about fertilizer. Got similar issues with animals and using backyards and so forth for animals to relieve themselves. Another thing that we see a lot of, especially in the aisles, are your gardeners, lawn care, maintenance folks that have decided that instead of raking up the grass and leaves, they push it into the canals. Okay, that causes a problem in terms of the nutrient load also, because that stuff all ends up decaying, and I get the calls about it all ending up at the canal and stuff along that line. So getting out the word to have your lawn services, not fertilize within 10 feet, having people not use their backyards for their animals or at least to pick up after their animals, and especially these lawn maintenance, dumping the stuff right into the canals does not help us at all. And with the prolonged heat right now and the nutrient load on there, that's one of the reasons why we're seeing some higher than normal and longer than normal algae blooms that are out there. So we need some help.
This has been one of my pet peeves for a long time. Not only the canals, they put it into the drains and the streets, and our cars and our boats and everything else. I think Weston has outlawed those blowers. Has the city ever thought about that?
Well, so I'll tell you, it's not just blowers. I mean, I've witnessed and I've, where people have used brooms and rakes.
True.
Because it's a lot easier to push it into the street and down the drain than it is to pick it up. And so, that clogs our storm sewers and so
But
forth.
blowers, I think, are the biggest offenders.
The blowers are being outlawed more for noise than for that issue, but,
It's a health issue too, all that stuff goes up in the air.
yep.
I have a question on that.
We're gonna, just to keep order, let's just do this. We'll go around the table. Yes, sir, and then we'll go, Donnie, did you have your hand raised?
Yeah.
Okay, and then Mary and John, and we'll just go around this way. Thank you.
On Fort Hill, Four Seasons, our backyard is Sunset Lake. I've been here since '99, this is the worst I've seen it. Is this a contributing factor, or is this just a build up here and here? It's the first time we've had it in our lake. The whole lake is green.
Can't definitively answer that. I mean, it has been warmer, than usual. So that has a lot to do with the breakout of the algae. And it could be also just site specific. It could be just more input nutrients from some type of source that's causing the algae to bloom.
Yes, sir, on the side.
All right, yeah, certainly we've dodged the bullet. It's nothing like, from the Clusatech to the St. Lucie River. I think it's been much kinder. But it is somewhat perhaps coincidental that shortly after the governor allowed release of waters from Lake Okeechobee south of the lake into Hillsborough Canal, North New River, and the Miami Canal, that all of a sudden became problematic. I'm not saying they're related. I'm just saying that there's a possibility they could be. And again, this has, from what I've seen, it's nowhere near the burden that's affected other parts of the state, but certainly it might be somewhat causal, in addition to the heat and the fertilizer and the grass clippings. That's just an uneducated person's feeling. Thanks.
Can I ask where you took those few samples from?
The state took the samples. The state's responsible agency for the algal bloom response, and the sampling was taken. They took samples at Esplanade Park, Cooley Hammock, 2 in the Isles, North Fork, 3 in the North Fork, and another one at Esplanade.
So none of the aisle pictures that myself, Brady, Quinn, the other people have sent you, where if there's dead animals floating and the green is this thick, it looks like paint, bright fluorescent paint.
Algae
So none of
will-
those samples were taken where there's dead animals floating?
Well, typically, if I may, what happens with the DEP, we've communicated to them, we have algae blooms, they can map, there's a current samples in the areas where people would be frequent or may frequent the waterways. No one's going to.
That's actually like scaring me to death. That answer is just not appropriate.
To her side, and sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you or anything like that, but, is there a way that we should maybe specifically have like a citizen hotline to where her concerns, like her area, be tested specifically if she's seeing this?
Can I pay to have it tested?
So-
Just get someone out there,
so-
please. I've
so
been
let me-
begging since June.
So let me just clarify, we don't have the capacity to test. Right? That DEP has testing facilities, and Broward County has some testing facilities. We can collect the sample, but we can't test it, we can't. And so there's I believe there's a statewide citizen hotline already, and you can always call our 8,000 number, 24/7 to report it, and it'll get to Larry and Kyle.
But to answer Donna, because you just said that we can collect, but we can't test.
Well, I mean, we'd be able to.
Oh, can we collect and then get to our, contacts at the county and state to then have them do the testing?
It would be through the state, and they would have to receive it and want those samples. They're the ones who are basically overseeing the program in its entirety.
So what's the best way that we as the city can request this and expedite it so that we can get that testing in that specific area?
Well, I think we have requested, and the state has responded.
On a weekly basis, we do inspections throughout the whole city, and we identify the areas that are impacted with the algae. And
we report those to the
We
state.
report those directly to the state, including Los Olas Isles. They've been on the list from day one.
And Donna, did you hear what Lee said, by the way? He said that we have requested testing from the state and they have declined.
Well, who are you requesting it? I mean, we need to take this all the way. I mean,
I just also want to
it's also a
qualify.
political year, so we need to hold people speaking.
I just also want to qualify, fish kills are necessarily due to the algae. What happens with algae blooms, the oxygen levels in the water decrease. So the
Iguanas
oxygen,
and rats, so.
so oxygen is depleted, and that's what causes fish.
And
It
then
happens a
these-
lot of time in the lake.
And there was a picture recently sent that Brady sent that had ducks that almost looked like post Exxon Valdez. They were so oily and greased up, 3 little ducks swimming in the green muck at the end of the aisles. You said you only test where people may swim and nobody would ever dare swim in the aisles.
Let
But
me
they do
clarify.
paddleboard. They do paddleboard.
Let me clarify.
They do paddleboard.
I'm one of them.
Let me clarify. We don't test. We report.
Whoever
The
tests.
state will only test where they believe people.
We don't dictate to the state where they test.
Can we suggest where they should test, where it's so
We-
Yes.
We actually identify the specific locations, GPS locations, within their database, where these pictures were taken, and we show them, here's a picture. We upload pictures on a weekly basis.
I've gone to WaterServe and some of these other like official web where I've uploaded pictures as well, and ours look like they have, is it this one, or this one, which like levels of badness, and it's even worse than the worst one there.
That's the DEP website? that you
Yes, the
submitted?
DEP, yes, that's it. yeah.
Right.
So we're reporting everything, right? Not only what you're sending us, but what our field staff is finding out there too. So, I mean, we're reporting it. We're requesting that they do their protocols and they test. But, I don't wanna speak for the state, but my guess is they're probably a little on the overwhelmed side, for this as well. So they're determining what their priorities are. Those are beyond us.
If someone,
Folks, we're gonna continue as we were going around the table, so John, Susie, and we're just gonna keep coming around, it's the easiest way.
okay.
John?
I've lived here 27 years, and I ride my bike all around the aisles, I walk all around the aisles. And what I have noticed is the standard stories are still the same. The one about the dog fecal material and everything, the people are in the aisles, walk around with stacks of plastic bags in their pocket, and they pick up after their dogs, and the amount of stuff that they miss, you could poke in your eye, okay? That's, I don't think that's a fundamental reason. Second reason is grass clippings. And I asked one of the homeowners that I know, I says, well, what do you have, how's the guy hauling the grass clippings? Why is he doing that? He says, well, the city won't take, they have to take them away and then have to pay extra for that, because nobody wants grass clippings, okay? So, I don't know if the state were to take the grass clippings and put them in a large trash bag, and the
Everybody
city
has-
would pick it up.
Everybody has a green garbage container,
Right?
30-gallon, or
Yeah,
not
I know.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
90.
And you can order more if you want
Right,
to, and they're free of
and
charge.
that's how,
Okay, so
that's how we collect them,
So, and you collect them, so,
where my gardener puts them.
okay, so why are the landscaping guys saying
Because
they
they
charge?
don't wanna pick it up and put it in the green container.
Okay, so they charge extra to the homeowner, all right,
No, they just push it into the canal.
well,
Load into the
I
sewage
mean,
main.
mine, I mean,
I
we as
could
homeowners
give you
are-
another landscaper, mine puts it all in the bins, I've got
Mine
I've
does
got
the
3
bins
bins.
and carries it, yeah, and we don't even have any grass.
I've seen them blow some grass, just on Fire Lake, I can verify 12 houses from my dining room window. The third thing that I have really noticed is that there are appearing everywhere on everybody's lawn, these little stickers, do not walk your pet here, this has been treated with fertilizer and anti-bug stuff and everything. And we never used to see those before, but now we see a lot of them. And so what I'm saying is, and I see these trucks going up and down, and they're nice modern trucks with big tanks on them and everything, and I'm saying, gee, the fertilizer salesman or the anti-bug salesman is making a killing, because he's really out pushing the business. Or should we be taking a look at seeing how many gallons of that stuff is being applied in our neighborhoods? You know, they say they're supposed to be responsible people and all that stuff. I don't buy it. A little bit of, you know, there has to, if this is so important, we should be in control of that. I know that up in Pennsylvania where I bought the property, they are nutso about septic tank discharge and the percolation and all that stuff. They go crazy about that. And in other places in the US they don't. But I would think that if we've determined that chemicals are a fundamental and major core, we should be putting together a long-term strategy to change the chemical or the amount that is put there and see if that can't help. Because the other two things are not a big deal.
The other, and we'll take that back to talk, I mean, the county does some regulation in that regard. But the other thing I failed to mention too, that we also have a predominant problem with in terms of nutrient load, or people living aboard vessels. And a lot of people are renting out backs of their homes to live aboard.
Not in our neighborhood.
It's my understanding that's illegal.
It is.
Yeah.
But
Is there enforcement as
try
far as
prove-
the city has?
To the extent we can prove it. I mean,
What is the burden of proof as far as that's concerned?
well, it's difficult because we do not have the ability to have a search. You can't get an administrative search warrant on a residential property, so, it's basically trying to find an ad or something along that line that demonstrates that there's some sort of commercial relationship.
That's,
It's very hard.
you'll see a lot of those, but that's an interesting one to bring up.
We're gonna go back to Susie, cause we're getting out of order now, around the table, back to Susie.
Mary has to go, she's gonna take it, and then it's gonna come back to me in a minute.
So,
Okay.
I'm sorry I have to leave. I'm just gonna echo what John said. Really, in all of these years until last year and this year, I've never seen anything like it. And granted, it is much worse where you are than it is behind my home in the old Rio de Riviera or whatever. But it is certainly something we're seeing where I'm not seeing a lot of circumstances that you've mentioned change. So I have about 5 questions. I'm happy to get these answers in writing because then we can provide them to my neighbors. I've already got the suggestions on fertilizer. So let me just read them off and then you can discuss them. Are you suggesting that we write our state legislators regarding this, since we aren't getting a response from Tallahassee? I know John's wife Pat had suggested last year that many of us collect our own samples and get them tested in a lab. If somebody could provide us that information, I think we would be willing to do it. I see a lot of people here from around the city, not just from the Isles, so I'm going to assume this is a citywide issue, not just an Isles issue, and that maybe a citywide meeting about what types of ordinances you need to draft would be appropriate, and that just as you're doing, Mr. Feldman, with your Go Big, Go Fast, that you send these briefings out about the fertilizer and so forth. But really, I don't think that's the answer, because I don't see these big changes occurring that would suddenly, in 2017, cause something like this. So it seems like if it's a citywide problem, and we're the Venice of America, we should be getting a handle on what's causing it, and then trying to work with our communities to address it. I've noticed the stains on your seawalls as I drive by every day. I'm gonna assume that's a similar issue that would happen with boats. And just finally, I do think if you could provide me a copy of what ordinances are currently in place that would impact this. Yes, Ann's written me a note. She's gonna speak, I know, on pipe breaks and what impact they've had. And finally, as a mother of 6, to the response that we don't have people in our canals, I would just echo just the paddle boards, the kayaks, the things that can happen. And I don't think that's a good answer, that we don't have people in our canals. And I'm sorry, one last question. I don't wanna know exactly where in the Isles the testing was done, whether it was done at your end or whether it was done at our end, and if we could get the results of those specific tests. But I also think, and I know, Steve, this isn't you, but I just wanna say that I think a citywide meeting on this is something that obviously needs to happen. Thank you.
And Mary, if you have those, if you wanna shoot an email with all those questions, so we have it on the record and we can respond, that would be great.
Okay, and just as an interim, let me just make a request right now for the emails that everybody's here, who's here today, so we can communicate with each other as citizens.
Excellent, thank you, Mary. Yes, sir.
Hi,
Through the event, I'm sorry, yes, go ahead.
okay, some of you may know this has been a long journey for me. I was on this last year. We had Channel 7 come out and they did a big, Mayor Dean was actually interviewed on that, and I think, because he was very worried about it. That was last year. So, I've also attended some meetings that by international companies, with scientific evidence of what's going on. Unfortunately, some of the knowledge that I learned wasn't fun, because they said it could take 10 years to just start making a dent. That wasn't fun. But they did say that you've got to start now, and if you don't start now, there's going to be even larger problems. What you did say was, one of the things that these scientists were saying is that you have to really be diligent on stopping the local trashing of your canals. And the city, what I'm worried about, I'm a paddleboarder. I see, you would not believe what I see daily going in our beautiful canals. This is what also worries me, if I were on the city, is lawsuits. Because I see people coming from all over the world in our waters, not knowing it's there. And some of the symptoms that I was told last year when I said, is it safe for me to paddleboard? And this is what came back to me from people in our state and local, that you could get some of the symptoms of toxic poisoning is abdominal pain, headache, sore throat, vomiting and nausea, dry cough, diarrhea, blistering around the mouth, pneumonia. Those are just some of the things. I was told, because I said, okay, then is it okay for me to paddleboard? I was told not to paddleboard. They said, it might not be safe to go in the water at this time. But what's sad is, what about the people that didn't get that information that I got? So, I would think that, I know that we're waiting for the state, but as a city, you might have to be a little more proactive. And even if we were to just start with something as simple as starting to just, when people see people blowing in canals, that if it's reported that there's even just a little, a small fine, that eventually, if it starts happening over and over like you do with speeding, people start knowing, you better tell your landscapers that you're gonna get fined, and you tell your landscaper, I'm not gonna pay this fine the next time, it's gonna come off of your fee, We did that with ours, and he bags it himself, he never complains. He has a truck that he puts all of his clippings in, and he takes it away. But I'm saying in my neighborhood, I've only seen maybe one or two people, and then other landscapers make fun of him for doing that. But if we all got together, and if we really, you know, if this becomes, if it's mandatory, and there's fines, if it's not, it's just one little, you know, that, and one other, I don't wanna hog the conversation here, but there's one other thing that's going on, is the West Coast is taking it a little more serious because of the red tide. And I do know that people that live in the St. Petersburg area, they can only fertilize their lawns and things on certain, I think, so many times a year.
They have restrictive ordinances
Yes.
on the West Coast.
Yes.
They only allow them to fertilize during specific periods of the year, other periods of the year they're forbidden.
So you can see it's a passion. I love our waters. I love living here. So nobody's pointing fingers, but we just want to be a little more proactive. And we really, I just applaud you all for letting us all speak, and thank you for that.
So you may not know this, but we actually have one police officer who's full-time dedicated to also environmental law enforcement, along with our environmental inspector.
But we need more than one. I mean,
Well,
with the with people living in these areas and seeing the trash that's there.
What we
and
found
it's-
is that when we get calls, typically it's, oh yeah, I saw this guy blowing stuff in the street, and by the time we get out there, there's no one there. People aren't necessarily willing to stand up and point a finger at someone else, or take pictures and provide the information. So we have some reluctance to report.
But I've never heard anybody ask for that. I mean, if you guys got a little more proactive and really started,
We actually
you know, and
said-
if we all did, you know.
What I think, what I think, because of, you know, really last year, 2017, we started getting the calls. This year, we implemented the weekly inspections with our environmental inspectors, and conversation with Larry and how staff is, you know, we're kind of, this will dissipate when the cooler weather starts in October, November, but starting very early next year is develop sort of a media campaign. Kind of big type of outreach to consolidate all this information, and we'll really try to hone in the message, and we'll work with our strategic communications department to get that message and get it out, so we get it out
with the
there.
bottles, you know, just all that signage, just to remind people, that'd be great.
And within resources available to us to get the message out.
Right, and keep in mind too, that a lot of this activity happens in the backyard. We don't have access
I agree, I
to
know.
the backyard, but I will tell you, you know, just from observations, we have lots of boaters out there that just toss their garbage off over the side. I mean, the gardener that you have, okay, who's hauling it away, the question I would have is where, okay? Because we have those green containers for that purpose.
They put them in special bags that they get from you guys? I don't know, they were.
No, they don't get special bags from us, okay? My guess is it ends up in a vacant lot somewhere else, or in a canal, some other.
So the only place that you can throw lawn
The place I would
things.
tell you to put it is
Yes.
in those green containers that we give,
Okay,
and then put that out once a week when it's supposed to be collected.
that's the only place where those are thrown.
That's the only place I can tell you, we know where it's going.
We've distributed, just in the same vein, we've distributed postcards to all of the licensed landscapers in the city. Like, we've basically told them that it's illegal to put anything into the streets or storm drains. It was clearly communicated to all.
Well, I heard, because I called in and they said that you do have rules and regulations, no blowing in the street, no blowing in the canals, but unfortunately, I guess they're not being enforced.
It's a
They're
misdemeanor, it
difficult.
has to be witnessed by.
Okay, yes, sir.
Thank you.
Excuse me,
Keep
has to
it-
be witnessed by a police officer?
Misdemeanor.
Yeah. And remember, we can't go in the backyards, yes.
Yeah, so I'm a third generation Florida native. This is the first time I've seen this cyanobacteria, the deadly stuff, the toxic stuff that we're talking about, the neon green stuff in our waterways. And I frequently paddleboard the intercoastal waterways. I also surf locally. This gentleman here stated specifically that when Governor Scott issued a state of emergency and had water started to flow south, it just seemed kind of, you know, ironic that all of a sudden we had a problem. So I wanted to investigate myself. I started looking at the waterways that feed Fort Lauderdale. You know, from Coral Springs along the 595 corridor, Locks Canal, into Pompano and Lighthouse Point. You know, the cyanobacteria tends to grow in where the water's still and there's not a flow, and the nutrients are built up and it feeds on that. So I'm looking in those areas, but I'm only seeing it here in Fort Lauderdale, not in the surrounding areas. So that leads me to believe that it's homegrown. It's probably most likely the source here. And I'm listening to people talk about fertilizer and pet droppings, and I'm like, yeah, I'm sure that adds to it, but I think something that needs to be taken a look at is the raw sewage leaks that you guys have.
We already looked at that.
Yeah, well, you know, it's almost like every other month that there's like a no swim advisory, or there's a high bacterial level that we can't go in the water. So
We had a 30-inch force main that was under duress for quite a long time. And basically we initiated the repair on that. Once that repair was done, earlier in the year, the sewage spills plummeted. And basically we haven't had significant spillage of sewage from before the algae started. And we can correlate that as far as the releases. And to the cyanobacteria, that organosus species that's out there right now is basically a freshwater species. So what it's doing down in this area, it's one of those question marks that we still have.
it grows in brackish waters
Yeah,
as well.
especially on the surface.
So the other thing that I noticed is like it tends to grow in harbors or like marinas, you know, so it's like there's the other aspect of where some of these large boats that have their own toilet systems, you know, do we really know if they're offloading the contents in their boats correctly, or are they just dumping it right into the marinas, you know, in the waterways?
The city for marinas that pump out facilities, that's closely monitored regularly. The private marinas, we don't have that kind of information.
I guess the correct word is blackwater, the blackwater,
Blackwater,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah, those are just some of the concerns that I think, you know, need to be looked at.
Thank you. Anyone else before we get to Ann, and we're coming around the table? Ann?
Okay, I've got a couple points. You mentioned that there's a city ordinance against blowing refuse into the streets. Except if you drive down Las Olas Boulevard, when they're mowing the center aisle, okay, the city employees are doing that and they're blowing it into the street.
And in
So
the canals.
enforce the rules with your employees to start out with.
Well,
Can we have the,
Just so you know, there's contractors, and we have terminated several contractors.
Okay, but you're paying for them. If they're doing it, the new ones should be fired.
Yeah, I don't disagree. So.
Name of police officer assigned to the environmental issues? Can the people who are affected by that, the taxpayers, can they have the name of that police officer so they can call if they have issues?
Gene McCoy.
And what number, Gene who?
McCoy.
And what number should he be called at?
The non-emergency number for Lauderdale Police Department, or you can email him at mccoy@fortlauderdale.gov.
Okay, I also really question, you know, that we've had more and more pipes breaking and more algae problems, and it's hard for me to believe there's not some sort of correlation there. And my last point, her question really is, in a month, we have a boat show. Do we want this slime in our canals for people to be seen all over the city? I mean, we're bringing people from all over the world, and is there anything being done to try and get rid of it before the boat show?
Well, here's the thing with
Company and Stewart
with
that
the
takes it.
treating the algae. One, these are surface waters of the state, so any type of treatment will need to go to DEP for approval.
How about skimming?
Well, one, algae goes through the whole water column, so it's just not at the top. It's not just a surface layer issue. So, as has been mentioned, the governor enacted an executive emergency order for 7 counties, which Broward is part of. He gave basically a $3 million grant for different counties to apply for technologies to try to mitigate for this. So I've been trying to do some research and kind of see what that technology is out there. The state is not strongly against any type of chemical treatment, biological treatment, because you're introducing something into the waterway which you may have unintended consequences. Lee County is proposing, and they're doing a pilot project where they actually do pump and treat the algae to a cost of $700,000. Okay, to pump and treat the algae, and they'll take the big tanker trucks, they'll take to a treatment facility, which I'm not sure that's a typical normal wastewater treatment plant or some other type of treatment facility, so I'm not sure about those details. But even the county managers come out and said that this isn't a solution. You know, basically the algae going to come back. So there's a lot of, the state's looking at this hard, but unfortunately there's not really any proven technology that, from my research, that the state is willing to kind of put their effort into supporting. I read somewhere they put an RFP back out in March to get solutions to this problem. Because they've been coming, it's like they said in the article, 60 people came to them to say, we can solve this problem. We're getting calls on that as well. When they actually submitted the RFP, there was only like 4 that were viable, and of those 4, they never moved forward with the applicant never moved forward with the solution. So I'm just throwing that out there to kind of throw out what the challenges are to mitigating the problem. And I agree that the solution is homegrown to try to mitigate what we can do on our bonds, not just in Fort Lauderdale, but it's also everywhere. You know, I live in Sunrise, so I see the same effects all over countywide. So, and this is a county issue and state issue as well. So, I think going with a media campaign, low-hanging fruit, low-cost type solutions is a first really holistic step to that direction. Hopefully then the state will get behind with some technologies that may have been proven and such forth. They formed a committee back in 2016 to kind of look at this, but sometimes the solutions may take months so we enact something now, it may take months to occur, which naturally would dissipate anyway with the cooler weather.
Todd, is the county doing anything?
The county, as far as I'm aware, is not. They did pull samples like they do with their normal water quality sampling, which they do as part of their normal process, but they have not implemented any type of mitigation steps, and anything like that.
Okay,
So.
yes, sir.
There is a company up in Stewart, and I just don't have the name locked in my head, but they do something with using ozone generators, and they just drop little probes into the back of canals, and they're able to clear out an algae bloom within a couple days. But it gets harder. It gets harder when you just let it grow.
You get early, it's.
You got to get it.
And that tends to work when you have closed bodies of water. Yeah. It doesn't work when you have tidally influenced.
And that's one of the things the state, they recognize in the literature research I did, is some of the applications that are being proposed out there is really pools, ponds, lakes, really small scale type. We were talking open water.
But they're using them in Fort Myers now.
Tidal exchange. That's a pilot that they're implementing as well. I did read that article that they're implementing that as well. And then from my perspective is, for me to put my support behind it, I want to see proven technology that actually works. You know, let someone else kind of do the legwork, especially, you know, the type of dollars that I'm seeing being spent out there in some of these efforts.
Yeah, right back there and then right here. Yes.
Yeah, I've grown up on the Los Olas Isles and paddle board maybe 3 times a week. And you know, in my opinion, if our only plan is to ask citizens to reduce grass clippings, you know, we're in really big trouble because you're putting a Band-Aid on a huge issue that's stems from a lot more. And I mean, that's a weak plan in my opinion. I mean, that's all we have right now.
Thank you. And I will just reiterate, any type of technology we need to put in our waterways will need to go to FDEP approval. And that, I mean, for some of these I read articles, it's taken 3 months to get FDEP to approve the technology. We are applying something to state water. So there are regulatory hurdles, you know, unfortunately it's not something we move this forward. But I'm hoping that for the state grant, and words I heard from the DEP secretary at the conference last week, that DEP, hopefully after the grant's been expended, they get reports back and stuff like that, they'll have good information, good data that can be used statewide.
The dugout canals, though, that's not state.
I'm sorry, what's that?
The dugout canals are not.
The dugout canals, right, correct. Not all water, state water.
Yes.
My name's Tim Myers. I live in downtown Fort Lauderdale. Relatively new to the area, about 1.5 years here. I paddle all the waterways, to the tune of my group about 30 miles a week. North Fork, South Fork, New River, up the Middle River, through the Isles, Sunrise Key. I love the conversation, but what we're missing is what's the root cause, right? So lots of solutions, lots of, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, but you folks even said, we don't really know what the root cause is. And I think if you were gonna pull back from all of this, as what I see in the waterways and what I see as I spend time, and there's a nice big group, this paddle group that we paddle around here, we all are recognizing the pollution level generally is higher than it appears to have been any other time. Most of these folks have lived here all their lives. So whether it's garbage in the water, whether there's nutrients, whether it's sewage discharge, whether it's downtown construction, the things that everybody was searching for, I see these guys washing down their trucks at the end of the day, right? And stuff going into the wastewater or rainwater system. I think what I would ask of you folks is to take a step back and say, what do we do about the pollution problem? Because the pollution problem is what's causing all of the stuff that we're talking about, whether it's plastic, whether it's boat discharge, it is a pollution problem. And I know that seems overwhelming, but it will only get worse. And I pick up every time I paddle, and I can't pull out as much as I see, which is a shame. So I don't know what we can do about it, but I think that what I wanted to come here for, what I wanted to say is our waters are getting dirtier. We're all experiencing the result of that. My ask of folks that work for the city and for the entire Fort Lauderdale area, where this is everywhere, this is a wide problem, is to think about how we deal with the pollution problem. And it's individuals, it's individual homes, it's individual people, it's boaters, it's all of that. But somehow there's got to be an answer to that problem if we even expect to address this, otherwise we'll just be talking. So that's what I wanted to say. I wanted to remind everybody that maybe we have to look for how to address that problem. So thank you for
Thank
listening.
you.
If I could just add on, that was sort of my first email to you way back then, and you were very responsive. Thank you. Supposedly there is a cleanup crew. I haven't seen it lately, but if they could just clean up the coconuts and the bloated dead iguanas and rats that are floating in these canals where he's paddleboarding, those are rich in nutrients too, as gross as those are. So, and I know that there was some sort of schedule of cleanup.
6 to 8 weeks. 6 to 8 weeks is what the canal
That's
city
too long. I
Well,
think we.
so they work every day that, that we have, and I have one crew that does it.
And the
we
more
have a
cleaning
great-
up, you
we
see
have-
what's going
But
on.
have we thought of hiring that, I
So-
even mentioned For Ocean, which is a nonprofit
So-
global organization.
Let me
Yes.
finish
And
for a
both.
sec. So 2 years ago, before the commissioner was on, we brought to the city commission an idea about how to better maintain the canals. And there was a cost to it. And that cost we were going to pass on to people who live on canals on there. And a lot of homeowners associations came out and said, no, don't do that. And the commission backed off on that. But if we're going to be serious about increasing the maintenance of canals, there's going to be a cost, and there's got to be a way to assess that cost out there. Then we can increase the maintenance of the canals and so forth. But it's going to come with the cost, whether you contract it out, you still got to pay the contractor, or you provide the city service, if you get a second crew in or a third crew in.
About the increased property taxes.
So keep in mind, and this is just my little pitch on property taxes. Everybody's market value is going up, but everybody's property taxes pretty much stay level because you're capped under the Save Our Homes to an increase in 3%. So when we had the reset in 2007, we're just getting back to the point with all the development that's occurring.
But some of those areas you're talking about are the highest taxed areas.
I could show you people in the aisle that pay less property tax than people who live less than 95.
Okay.
But
I'll bring that back to the home, as a homeowner.
It all depends on the homestead and the purchase year, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, but please correct on that.
So So we have not seen, you know, reflection of market values that everybody sees when we look at Zillow and everything.
My value's gone down and I bought last year, so my value's gone down and I bought it at a below market price, so it's, I haven't seen this increase in market value.
So if your value's gone down, your property taxes have gone down too.
No, they're staying the same. We're
No,
doing
mine
that.
actually went down, my monthly value went down, my property tax went up. Yes.
Good afternoon, I wanna thank you all, first of all, for having this meeting, and thank you all for coming to the meeting. My name's James Cameron, I have been in Fort Lauderdale since 1999, I'm a yacht captain. I've been literally on the waters around here pretty much every day, of the year. There's a few things that I wanted to bring to attention that people may not be aware of. One of those things being that, yes, nutrient load is the main reason why we are having cyanobacteria. That nutrient load, though, is not being instigated from our own neighborhoods. It's part of it, it's part of it, but it's not the root cause. I have a couple of websites that I will share with everybody that if you can think about it, Lake Okeechobee is the heart of Florida. That is our source water and the source of our problem, whether it's the west coast of Florida, St. Lucie, us, what you'll start seeing in Miami, Canals, as the lake rises and it gets to too high a level, it has to be drained. I'm not sure who makes the decision of which canals, the water goes through.
Army Corps.
The majority of it, correct, the course. The majority of it goes down the Caloosahatchee and the St. Lucie. But I've been monitoring for the past month and a half of where they've started opening it down south. I'm on the North Fork of the New River. There has been a direct correlation between them opening the gates and the algae being present in our waterways. Just if anybody wants to know, this is a real-time, I've got 2 real-time consulting firms that you can go onto their websites. One's granduskinland.com, that's GRANDUSKYLAMB.com, and the other one is MacVickerConsulting.com, MACVICAR Consulting.com, and you can watch the gates, whether they're open, whether they're closed, and how many cubic feet per second is being discharged towards our waterways. That being said, we don't have control over that. That's all Corps of Engineers. To my understanding, and I'm not 110% sure about this, but to my understanding, I believe the canal comes down around the swap shop, and I believe that's where about the last gate is. So it's been my thought of how do we take that water that I don't believe is a navigable waterway past that gate? How do we do that and create some sort of filtration system? It's not gonna fix the problem on a state level, but it could probably help us on our side. Tourism's gonna be the lifeblood, and if our waters turn to the West Coast waters, we're screwed. That's it. We are done. There's a few different ways that I've been kind of researching to see if we can do something. There is a non-native plant called duckweed, which is a great filtration device. Once again, it is non-native, and it can explode on its own if left unchecked. So if you were to use it, you would have to do it in such a confined way of almost like pens in that waterway after the gate to try and filter the water. These are just thoughts that I've been having. Secondly, I don't know if it would be feasible. To me, once again, I'm a yacht captain, I kind of understand some filtration and stuff like that. But if we could filter that water from before the gate to when the water's coming past and into the intertidal zone, would be fantastic. I don't know
I don't know how you do that with, you know, the microns that you would have to get down to actually clean. I don't know if there's a feasible way to do that. It's probably not, but the duckweed is, to me, you know, kind of one way to do it. My next question, you know, I'm not opposed to putting something on the ballot for the city of Fort Lauderdale to eliminate the use of fertilizers. I know that's a big ask. I'm just saying personally, I'm not opposed to it. And while we're on the subject of asking citizens to curtail their own use of fertilizers, is the city using Roundup? Is the city, regardless of whether it's close to the water or not, are we using Roundup as a weed control system within our city? Are we using fertilizers in our city parks? I would like to see if we can kind of re-examine all that and whether we want to maybe change course of companies or the way we do it, or just look at, you know, if we're using Roundup, that's stop. And that's you know.
We've tried alternative weed control, and some are successful. Sometimes it does take Roundup from my understanding, Roundup to get the sometimes it just needs to be used in other alternatives or not necessarily regarded. But I'm just saying that to show that the ethic is there to look at alternatives to weed control, that type of thing.
I understand that, but would we rather have some dandelions in the grass, or would we rather have a thriving, you know, tourism issue? What, yeah, it does, I understand, but I'm not, and I don't think anybody should be looking at the interests of a few specific companies. I think we need to look at this as a community and what we want as a community, and we all want clean water.
One of the things one of the things we're doing in our parks is we're trying to change out our fields to artificial turf.
Okay.
So, you know, that easier to maintain, no fertilizer. The kids still want green grass to play, or a green surface. But all that comes
at a cost. Understand. All this stuff that I'm talking about, it all does come to a cost. It doesn't necessarily, it shouldn't be burdened on just the homeowners on canals. You know, there's a lot of hotels that are on the beach that are popping up right, left, and center that are creating a lot of income. You know, it's not just on us. And I see a lot of high rises going up downtown. I see thousands of new living units that are coming into play that can all help to pay towards these solutions.
I could just highlight the regulatory side. I know it's been brought up a couple times on, you know, banning fertilizers, that type of thing. A lot of the ordinances on the West Coast predate the state ordinance from 2013-ish. So back then, the early 2010s, early before that, there's a lot of push counties and cities banning fertilizer, banning only during certain times of the year and so forth. The state has preempted that in ordinance. So specifically the state, and I read it verbatim, it says the department, which the department referring to is the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, FDEP, the department has exclusive authority to regulate the sale, composition, packaging, labeling, wholesale and retail distribution, formulation, including nutrient content level, and release rates of fertilizer. This subsection expressly preempts such regulation of fertilizer to the state. So I know that's a lot of legalese in there, but in essence, the ordinance we have on the book was allowed in 2013. So that's kind of the ordinance we're probably going to be stuck with, for lack of a better word, as far as educating.
And so many times the state does preempt us from home rule on so many issues, not just this. Now, I'm going to have to scoot out, and I apologize. Fatima, though, hopefully Lee, Larry, Todd, maybe just a few more minutes. I've got to run to 2 other events. I apologize. It's that kind of day. But I want you to know how valuable this has been. We've been taking notes, but also leave your information on those sign-in sheets so we can stay in touch with everyone and get more feedback. Hopefully you all have my email address and Fatima's email address to keep giving us these ideas, these websites, this information. It's really important. Folks will stay here for a few more minutes, hopefully, while I scoot so we can finish just a couple more comments around the table. But I wanna thank you, Lee, and thank you, everybody. This has been really valuable. So, there's so much more that we need to do, and, you know, we'll try to get there within the parameters that the state has put over us. But you mentioned something about political season. You should really contact your state legislator and your state senator. Gary Farmer, state senator for the area. Most of you probably have George Moritas as your state representative, but that'll be over soon, and it'll either be Chip LaMarca or Emma McCullum. One of those two people are running in November. Actually, I think I'm going to see them tonight at the Central Beach Alliance meeting in a short time. But you've got to hound your state representatives, your state senator, and your state legislator, because they have so much more control over these issues than we do. That doesn't mean that we can't do more, and we'll have that conversation with staff. But I apologize again, but thank you. Thank you. Fatima and Lee, if you want to just keep just going around the table. I don't think we have that many more questions, but thank you. Go ahead. Thanks.
Sorry, just one final thing. Is the city willing to partake in their side and say we're not going to use Roundup here?
No.
Why?
So we're looking at replacements, but again, I do have some areas where Roundup right now to us is the only solution, so we're moving away from it where we can. We're looking for more natural and organic variations that will accomplish.
May I ask where those specific spots are and why it's still important to be weed-free at that specific spot?
So I don't know that I can give you the specifics now, but when we get back to you, but.
Does the city have any kind of contract with Roundup?
No, we buy it at home. Yeah.
On the West Coast, Home Depot is taking stuff off the shelves, and they only put it on certain times, so they are being proactive.
Yeah.
That's the code that was
Preempted.
That's the one that we're talking about.
That's why they came up with the preemption.
Exactly.
Maybe a lot.
Yes.
I didn't know if everyone here knew that.
You had mentioned earlier about a Florida-friendly fertilizer, and it was up to code. Is that something that people are aware about, the landscape companies, are they aware of that?
They're aware of, they actually, as part of the code, as part of actually, we adopt a state code, they're required to be trained in Florida-friendly fertilizer practices, as the commercial fertilizer applicators are. And going back, and we see landscape companies blowing in the streets, you know, we have in the past sent letters to them. We not a violation of, hey, just FYI, you were observed, nice friendly letter. We, you know, we have a code in the books. Please make sure you guys are following. We have done that as well, in lieu of taking official force action.
And we've sent pictures of their staff blowing the stuff in the streets.
But I think we can do a better job.
Do they know where to get the fertilizer? I didn't even know there was such a, I mean, is it labeled, is it?
They're all licensed.
Like, could I go to Home Depot and see Florida-friendly fertilizer? Like, would I know what it?
The fertilizer's not necessarily Florida friendly. The application of the fertilizer Florida is.
Okay.
You want to look for the low
It's not the
nutrient.
product, okay.
I
Thank you.
disagree with that, because I was down the beach right by BMR, and I witnessed the other morning the new truck that they've got with the fertilizer sprayer, spraying all the new plants at the South Beach Park and directly around the storm drains, right before it rains. So, I've got photos and video on my phone, if anybody wants copies of those.
Okay, well.
I apologize, there's another meeting that's scheduled in here, so we have to wrap this up, but if everyone signed the sign-up sheet.
I want to bring up one thing before everybody leaves real quick, just real quick. Back in, September 2nd, when Scott released the waters to go south, right? Did you, everybody here recognize that the bacteria levels here on the count, you can write this down, you probably want to write this down, is 327. Does anybody know what that means?
Drink was on what?
The enterococcus. Okay. All right. Did you know that it's 327? Anybody know that? Do you know what that means? Okay. At a scientific level, it's like it's pretty bad, right? So 100 is bad. 100 is bad. This is 3 times that. This is unacceptable.
119 is bad.
Thank you. So at the end of the day, I would say we have enough
from manure,
powerful
right?
people. We have enough powerful people in Fort Lauderdale, and these that live in these canals and these multi-million-dollar houses that are connected with the state. That this is unacceptable. I'm sorry, but we should do something here, and I hope that this list doesn't go by the wayside, and we can all stay in connection, because we have enough people in here that care.
And talk it up, you know, talk to people.
Oh, are you on the Facebook?